What a good morning, everybody, and welcome to Alicia Mackay Show on today. It's the 1st of July. Pinch and a punch for the first of the month, everybody, and no backs. It is very exciting to see you all here this morning. And if you have woken up and you've thought, it's not very good to be me today, I wish I didn't have to wake up, I'm going to tell you why you're lucky. And here's why you're lucky. Because you don't live in Titirangi. Here's what's going on in Titirangi. Feral chickens. Seriously, there are feral chickens terrorizing children and being blamed for an infestation of, and I quote, cat-sized rats on the streets by the library. Now, this is in West Auckland Camp, if you're wondering where Titirangi is. This has been going on for literally years. And about 3 years ago, they spent a whole bunch of money to get rid of all the birds, right? So they got rid of like 250 chickens. And they were like, we like humanely rehomed them in theory. But then they came back. Now, not only this, it gets better than this. Not only is there a flock of feral chickens in Titirangi growing and bocking and stopping people from coming into the town centre, Stephen King found out about it when The Guardian retweeted it, and he tweeted about it. And I quote, hang on, let me get this correctly. The chickens came out of the shadows with a thirst for vengeance. That is a Stephen King quote about West Auckland.
I love it. Now, look, I want to know what my question is. If this has been going on for 3 years, why are we only hearing about it now?
That's honestly, this is my thought as well. They thought they got rid of the chickens. They did not get rid of the chickens. And as someone who grew up with chickens, I've got a lot of sympathy for this.
We had backyard chickens, and they had, the thing I enjoyed about having chickens in our backyard was that they turned out to be the origin of quite a lot of phrases in English. And I'm trying to think of one that, there's the pecking order, there's something fully fledged, there's something that's cocksure. There's a handful more that I can't remember now.
No, only one of those is a word. What is cocksure?
Cocksure.
Yeah. As an alpha person, Alicia, I'm surprised you don't know what that means.
Also,
for the record, let the audio listeners know that Alicia made the erect penis fist forearm shape.
I've never heard it called that before. That was beautiful.
Yeah. Also, what does fledging have to do with chickens? Fuck, I feel ignorant all of a sudden.
Fledged, anything fully fledged, like when it's born, it's got its down, and then it's fully fledged when all its feathers come out. That's not necessarily straight from a chicken, but it's definitely a bird analogy.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
We're not very connected to the natural world, you and I. Apart from that one time you had a plant's face.
No.
Some of us have just been living far more naturally and connected to nature, including having a backyard chicken run. You've had chicken runs before.
I have grown up with chickens. My whole family is I don't know, like into like goats and gardens and that. And so they grow their own vegetables, and they have a lot of chickens, and like I didn't necessarily.
But as you would know, you don't count your chickens before they're hatched. So can I just get can you remind me what the description of these roe chickens was again, please?
Well, they're feral chickens. They're not just rogue chickens; they're feral.
And this is probably striking a chord because of the feral hogs incident, which CV strikes me as someone who can probably remember the details. CV, can you remember the attack of the feral hogs?
I mean, it was not just one attack; it was a plague, and there was it was used in the US gun rights debate as an excuse why they needed assault rifles, because there were so many feral hogs that they had to get them under control. Other animal incidents of note: Shakira, noted Latin pop star, was attacked by wild boars when walking through a nature reserve.
I'm sad to hear that didn't happen while she was on stage. Thought it would have been a much better story if she'd been attacked by boars
they might have
during
confused
the
her for something
performance
else.
of her 2010 World Cup hit.
Okay, I just wanted to make the point that it's actually pronounced Shakira.
You're right. I do withdraw and apologize. Shakira.
Well, other animal incidents, because I'm glad that's where your brain went, CV, because that's where I went with it. And then I was thinking about the Black Panther in Ashburton, the urban legend of the Black Panther, which is probably just a big cat, which gets cited every few years.
It was the basis for the hit film. It was highly adapted, but we got there.
But we got there. But then I was thinking about.
You're trying to tell me that the setting for Black Panther a mispronounced version of Wanaka?
No, we do. This is definitely one we need to give context for, which is that in around 2004, there was a reported sighting of a panther stalking the mid-Canterbury Plains. And this made the front page of multiple issues of the Ashburton Guardian, where Alicia and I were lucky enough to spend our teen years. And it just became one of those mythical beasts to go with the Fiordland moose.
Okay, but I don't want you to think this is all funny, because then I went sort of searching, because I was thinking about feral cats, as you do when you read about feral chickens. And I was like, oh, feral cats still a problem. And then I discovered there's something worse than feral cats in New Zealand. And in Collingwood, which is by Nelson or by Golden Bay, they've got some kind of serial cat kidnapper or catnapper. That just sounds like they're sleeping, doesn't it? Anyway, there are apparently dozens of cats have been taken from their owners over the last few years. There's a whole bunch of media. Honestly, we're reading the wrong media, because I had never heard about this either. There's a whole bunch of media coverage about it. Some people have had upwards of 3 or 4 cats, one at a time, stolen from their house. It's bad.
Well, the problem with cats is that they obviously kill a whole heap of native wildlife, and cat owners are notoriously irresponsible for locking them up at night. And we had an incident where a cat in the house where we had the chicken run in Melbourne's inner north, we had a chicken or two killed by a neighbouring cat, and we caught the cat. It had a phone number on its tag, so we called the owners and said, hey, we've caught your cat. And the owner said, no, that's not our cat. And we just got in this glorious circular argument with them, denying it was the cat, even though that was the only way we could have gotten their phone number. And so if you're someone who cares about local fauna, or if you're someone who's got backyard chickens that are falling victim to wild cats, then I can kind of understand it. Cats are an absolute blight on both Australia and New Zealand.
Hold on. So because cats are a problem, you think you should be able to go to people's homes and steal their beloved moggies from them one at a time in a community, taking dozens of cats, just going to their house and taking them? That's what you think, Cameron Fink? Is this on record publicly?
Things are slightly more complicated than that. And honestly, I'm leaning towards the no cats if it means that the presence of the cats wipes out all the local wildlife. Yes, I'm saying it.
Golden Bay, I think we've just found our man.
Excuse me while I move this suspicious wriggling sack into a less visible location.
My question was, what media is this being covered in that you've suddenly read?
Well, I actually went down a rabbit hole. I'm pleased you've asked me about this, because
a rabbit hole. Interesting.
I got stuck in a chicken coop of interneting because this started from a very serious place, because I read some the research that's come out from Reuters about basically news avoidance. So there has been like quite an international discussion happening about the fact that people do seem to be, they're terming it selective news avoidance, and it's actually really interesting. So they're going, okay, for the most part, people are still quite engaged in news, but apparently there are a lot of people that are either avoiding the news or just avoiding parts of it because it makes them feel bad. And we've talked a lot about doom scrolling and the impact that excessive media consumption has on our lives here on the Alicia Mackay Show. And so I got quite interested in going down this kind of thing, reading about selective news avoidance and the fact that actually more people now consume their news through social media than they do directly seeking news. And because of that, the news that we see is the news that makes for good articles on Facebook or outrage on TikTok or posts on LinkedIn. And so the kind of cute regional news about feral chickens and catnapping doesn't make our feeds because we have to go and look for that, which is what I did after I was reading about selective news avoidance. I was like, what's going on outside of all the like wars and outrage and stuff? And it turns out
Google terms then. How did you find it?
I just went on to stuff and went digging into the regional areas and that kind of thing to just be like, what's the news I'm not seeing because I'm not looking for it. So that's actually how I got here. And I think it is an interesting chat because like the idea that people have figured out that news makes them feel bad is kind of interesting to me.
Well, and Stuff have been quite bold in completely not dealing with Facebook at all. I mean, none of their news now gets posted onto Facebook, and it's still the number one read news site in New Zealand. There was a minor Twitter thing this week where Australian comedian Nina Oyama tweeted that New Zealand isn't a real place because when you go to read the news, you just type stuff in.
I saw that. That was great. There's no like masthead that commands attention. The Times, the Guardian, or whatever. Nah, just stuff. What stuff's happening?
You know how you were saying last week, Cam? I think it was last week, maybe the week before. We were talking about substitutions, and you were like, "Oh, everybody thinks that advertising doesn't affect them." And then obviously it does because people keep paying for advertising and stuff keeps getting bought. But we all think we're the exception. I kind of started examining where I sat with that with news because I read that and I went, not me. Like, I'm an engaged consumer. I'm not just getting my news from social media headlines. And I don't really even go on social media. And to be fair, I don't spend a lot of time on social media with the exception of LinkedIn. But also, ergo, I'm actually not reading that much news. And I feel kind of weird about it. Like, I was that kid at university who, we've talked about this before. I used to go into uni early and go to the library every morning with a chai latte, by the way. That's who I was at the time. I was young. Don't hate me. And they would have all the international newspapers laid out on the big wooden leaning reading things at the library. And I would flick through the international newspapers every morning, feeling like an absolute intellectual. And I really cared about it. And I remember like watching Al Jazeera and going to a whole lot of effort when I did my media degree to take in diverse news sources and really be informed. And now I'm like, oh, I better check stuff before the show in the morning. I have no idea what's going on.
And the one of the big problems that gets talked about quite a lot is that who is responsible for what news you see. And you're a terrible judge of what news you should see. It's so self-selective in the way the algorithms work is it just feeds you what you already want to know. And so one of the massive problems is the reward that the platforms get for giving you what you already want. And previously, you would buy a newspaper or a magazine or something that vaguely aligned with your views, but then you were kind of more at the behest of the editor or the person who chooses what's important and what to publish, or how even or how opinionated an editorial could be, and the distinction between an editorial and a factual report. All of those decisions have kind of been taken away from someone with authority or a reason or some sort of education or training in that area. And all of it's instead led up to being led by advertising to spoon-feed you stuff you already like. And it's horrifically dangerous.
And stuff they want you to buy. And not even stuff you're going to like, but stuff that you might predictably become outraged about if they write the headline correctly. So you don't even have to click through. You can read the headline and then read people's comments on it and fire off in there, which is brilliant for engagement. It's not great.
I play a little game when I see a headline of what's the top comment going to be. That's my little meta play on the news is, okay, what particular flavor of bigotry are we about to get when we click view more comments?
I can't believe I was about to make some smart ass joke about you on dates, and I'm just going to take it away. I was going to say, I can't believe people say you're not fun, CV, because that sounds like an epic game to me.
If this date were a newspaper article, what would the top comment be?
Honestly, maybe CV and I should be dating, because that's exactly the sort of question that I would get excited about on a date, which is possibly why we're mates and don't have any other mates. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, this is why you shout nerd at me, knowing deep inside that that's you.
It's all projection, really.
It really is. Okay, so other things going on, things I'm doing this week, my fan of the week. I talked to Cam about this yesterday. I have this sort of, I mean, I'm not going to do therapy on the show, but I've got this sort of interesting thought experiment happening in my brain where I realized recently that, like, I have spent the last approximately 20 years being by default needlessly oppositional or countercultural. By default, right? I have spent 20 years going, if other people like it, I don't want it. If other people are doing it, they're dicks and I'm not going to. And if you find out about that band I like, I hate them now. Like, I've spent 20 years doing that. And I think it stems from when I was a teenager. I was just kind of poor and a bit of a loser. And I got to high school and I looked around at all the kids that clearly had like resources and like stuff. And I went, I don't want to be them anyway, because I couldn't. And so I just heartily embraced this like eyeliner wearing, cigarette smoking, mentality. And I just sort of never really got out of it, although I did quit the cigarettes. And so I'm starting to wonder, this is my thought experiment for the week. What if I take that away? What's underneath? What do I actually like?
Oh, this is the classic problem, isn't it? When you realize something that you do is a reaction to a need that wasn't being met long, long ago. You build up this, not a shield exclusively, but in a large part, a pre-defense for getting over something that's not going your way. And it becomes your identity because you are what you spend your time doing. And if you spent 20 years doing something, which probably all of us have the way you've described, at some point in adulthood, you're like, just as you are now, just like, am I?
Yes. So like, turns out I do want to do the Wordle. Why was I a dick about it for so many months?
And you were a massive dick about it. And now you're like on the front foot with like, oh, I got myself a 2. How are you going?
I got it in 3 today, by the way.
For months and months and months, you were like, no reason at all, just default position. The thing you like is shit. Oh, that thing you like that's bringing you joy that you do with your friends, I hate it.
Popular, is it? Not for me.
Yeah, I have that instinct as well, I think. Like, I've definitely been that about Wordle. I've never tried it. What I do like, though, is the Hurdle. Have you tried Hurdle?
Yeah, the song one.
The music
we
one?
played that in Christchurch. Yeah.
It's very good. And it's like, wow, I'm slightly alternative. I'll do the Hurdle.
I can enjoy the popularity. I can understand what people are talking about, but I'm doing it in a niche way with a platform that you wouldn't quite understand.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is everyone who ever used Linux and was just like, oh no, I actually use Linux. Yeah, okay.
And then actually, so one of the things that I've enjoyed about the Wordle craze and the spin-offs like the Quirtle and the Octurtle and the Flaggle and the Wordle, there's heaps of different options where you can explore different areas or trivia or things, There's one called Nerdle where you have to work out a sum and the mathematical equation, which is also quite fascinating. And I've played heaps of those and a bunch of my friends have done so too. And the only one where we publicly post our results or anything is Wordle, because it was just such a beautifully simple, incredibly captivating game that was easy to share. And do you remember first seeing the grid of answers on someone's either Twitter feed or Facebook or wherever it was, and just marveling at how much you wanted to know what that was about before you knew what it was? Because I definitely remember that. I remember seeing it on Twitter and just going, what is that? I've seen 2 or 3 people posting about it. I want to know what it is. It was absolute genius in terms of a viral game. And it's no wonder that New York Times spent $1 million or something buying it off. Amusingly enough, the inventor's name is Bob Wordle or similar. His first name's not Bob.
Yeah, it is.
But his name is actually Wordle.
So, no, I saw the shapes and I was like, oh, everyone's doing something I'm not doing. I hate it.
Classic Alicia.
That was my instinctive reaction. Was I saw the shapes and I was like, and my brain now is not even, it doesn't even go through like a cognitive process. I just see it and I'm like, bullshit.
Yeah, and the Wordle game that Joanne's put in the chat is a great one. There's Flaggle, which we played with Nikki and our friends down in Christchurch. It's awesome. And the thing that I quite like about Wordle, the original Wordle, is that it limits how much you can play. So with a lot of games and a lot of the variations, it's not as limited in terms of only one game per day, and you just burn yourself out of it really quickly. Whereas this one was beautiful in its simplicity and also how much it restricted how much you could play. Genius.
Yeah, but now I go Wordle, Quirtle, Octurtle, Octurtle Gold.
Octurtle Gold.
Mm.
Look, those challenges ones are quite good too. I'm a fan. I'm a massive fan.
No, they're too easy. They're too easy. I got a perfect score on the herbs and spices one.
Not only are you too good for it, you're too good for it.
Just saying. CV, do you have anything for us this week?
I do. So what I wanted to talk about this week is the rather surprising testimony that the US Select Committee on the January 6th attacks were given. So just a little bit of background on this. So this is the the US House has been tasked with investigating the January 6th attacks. We're having more and more testimony. Most of the key players are basically refusing to testify at all. So Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has been held in contempt of Congress for his just childish sitting in front of a committee and saying the fifth, which is, pretty amazing. But in the last few days, an assistant to Mark Meadows, who was Trump's chief of staff during the insurrection, gave this incredible under oath testimony that showed just what it was like to be in the Trump White House and how much of a child he was and how many tantrums there were. So she testified that she walked into a room where he had thrown his lunch against the wall, and there was ketchup dripping down the wall. And...
Was it a Happy Meal? What was the food?
Well, it was Trump, so it was something with ketchup, presumably burger type orientation. But also, there was this brilliant bit where so Liz Cheney, for some reason, is the one interviewing Cassidy, and if a Cheney is outraged at your behavior, you know that things are bad. And she asked Cassidy, was this the only time that dishes were thrown? And there's a brilliant little pause, and she says, no, it was not. And talked about multiple times that dishes were thrown against the wall. One time in which he just, instead of throwing everything at once, he threw the tablecloth and dumped the whole lot of dishes.
Was he trying to do the trick, you think, where you pull the tablecloth out and leave your Happy Meal on the table?
Quite possibly. But this was probably the least shocking bit. I mean, it's not surprising that Trump literally was throwing his toys against the wall during his presidency. But what was actually shocking was he knew that the people marching on the Capitol on the 6th of January were armed, and actually asked for the metal detectors to be deactivated and taken away, quote, because it was making the crowd smaller. So he and the entire staff knew what a danger this was and decided to do it anyway. They were all
and I remember the part that was anticipated was that he said, they're not here to hurt me. So I know they're carrying weapons, but I don't care because I know they're not for this political rally. They're carrying them for what they're going to do later, which I'm asking them to do. So yeah, asking people to turn off the metal detectors, not because he didn't think someone was in danger. He just knew it wasn't him.
Yeah, and the next tantrum was when the motorcade was going back to the White House. He was advised that they should go back to the White House, and he wanted to go back to the rally. And what Cassidy quoted him as saying was, "I'm the fucking president. Turn this car around." And then he lunged towards the steering wheel of. He was traveling in the motorcade. The president travels in a vehicle called the Beast, which is worth $1.5 million, is bulletproof, bomb-proof, contains 2 liters of the president's blood type. All in aid of all in
just
aid
smeared on the windows, like.
No, just in cooler bags, ready to go.
And is it
just
called
in
the
case
Beast by
something
every
happens.
president, or is that something that Trump specifically called the car during his term?
No, this is long-standing presidential tradition. But my point here
Please
is
step into the Beast.
the
So
millions
good.
of dollars worth of protection that they were giving Trump are in aid of nothing if the president is a lunatic and just lunges. So he lunged towards the steering wheel from the back seat, which is very logistically difficult, and then he went for the throat of a Secret Service agent. So screaming, "I'm the fucking president! Get me back to the Capitol!" And just millions of dollars worth of protection focused on someone who is an absolute lunatic.
Oh, the
And
audacity.
throttling a driver. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And here's what I don't like about myself based on the earlier chat. When you're explaining this to me, I'm like, yeah, get it. You are the fucking president. And obviously, that's my instinctive reaction.
It's a good thing you're not in charge of a country. Although I get the feeling you might have been pretty handy for the wild chicken plague. I reckon setting you loose on those would have been your absolute sweet spot.
I mean, the problem is that now this crowd that's behind these Capitol protests and everything else, we've now got presence in New Zealand been classified as terror groups. Is that right, CV? You across that?
I'm not across that.
We've had 2 new terror groups gazetted, and one of them, I'm fairly sure, is linked to the interests behind the riots and the march on Capitol Hill. So they've got really weird names. I'm trying to remember their names.
Is it the Proud Boys?
Yeah, the Proud Boys. They've been designated as a terror, and the Base. So that's the 2 new terrorist organisations that we've gazetted: the Proud Boys and the Base. So, and they're linked to the Capitol Hill riots. So it's an interesting one, because I know we decided not to touch that other topic, and I think we shouldn't touch that topic. But it is just interesting to me that we are genuinely affected and connected to what happens in the United States, even though we really wish we weren't. And Australia, I think, does a similar thing to what happened in my upbringing, which is you go, no, that's an American thing. We don't do that here, like Halloween or whatever. And we've really resisted this idea in the same way that everyone thinks they don't respond to advertising, that what happens in America politically or socially or economically has any impact on us. We like to think that, okay, we might consume all of their media and watch what they're doing, but, we're not directly affected by it. But actually that just simply isn't true. And when there is legislative change, or there's social change, or there's political change, and it's happening there are very direct links to how that affects what's happening in Aotearoa. And the camp out at Parliament and the funding for that was an excellent example. And the referendum on marijuana was another great example of how powerful interests from the states do have a very direct financial and logistical link to what's happening in New Zealand. And I find it really scary.
Yeah, it's very connected to that conversation about media we had before, where people's consumption habits can bring ideas back in a way that we don't quite expect. And I am a little bit like that line you said before about, well, that's over there, because people often do import arguments that we don't necessarily have actually in this country, and it's a fascinating time for that. But that there is that element as well of people assuming or knowing so much more about US domestic policy than they do about their own, and seeing their activism in that context. I mean, I know so many people who are, feeling the burn politically, but wouldn't know where that sits on the New Zealand spectrum.
Yeah. And I look at my kids on TikTok, for example, and I was a real dick about it to start with, shocker, with the 2 on TikTok because they talk about things going on in the world, and it's so heavily influenced by what's happening in the States that I would say, because like when TikTok was nearly banned, Donald Trump tried to ban it, but the court said no. Because they were a Chinese company and wouldn't let a States company overtake them or whatever. And so my kids were going on about this. And I'm like, why aren't you searching for what's happening in New Zealand? Like, why aren't you getting into New Zealand content? This is terrible. And the way they pronounce words and this kind of stuff is so influenced by what's happening in the US. But, the counter argument to that is pretending as though we're immune to it or that it doesn't actually affect our lives is really unhelpful, in the same way that, like, pretending I'm not going to like Wordle is really silly, because I've always loved word games.
So the one that I've noticed that really bothers me and you equally. So quite often we have a cultural divide across the ditch where we're quite parochial about our own country. One thing that you and I have come together very strongly on is our distaste for the pronunciation of words like Tuesday or new. And the influence is probably TikTok, where even your peers, not even just your kids, but people are starting to pronounce it Tuesday and news. And frankly, that can fuck off.
Yeah, it can really fuck off. Like, I'm a tolerant person. No, I'm not. But I try to be. I try to be a tolerant. Like, it's just absolute bullshit. Like, politically, meta, I'm a tolerant person, but not interpersonally, one-on-one. But
I'm politically tolerant, but not of anyone around me.
Pretty much. Like, we've talked about this before. I've got meta empathy, got a lot of political and social empathy, but just one-on-one, not so flash. But yeah, Tuesday and news, stop it. Stop it
so
now.
I thought I might wind it up with coming back to how many phrases we use in English are based on chickens. And the first obvious one is to chicken out of something.
Classic.
Yeah, you count your chickens before they hatch. You put all your eggs in one basket. You know spring chicken. Someone takes you under their wing.
Oh,
Chickens have
that's
come
a
home
good
to
one.
roost. There's a chicken and an egg conundrum.
Yeah, of course.
There's quite a lot, really. And so someone might fly the coop. And, mate, don't lay an egg. There's the pecking order. Scarcer than a hen.
Mate, don't lay an egg.
And quite appropriately for this show, quite often you just wing it.
Yeah, that's all we do. Look,
We're
I think
all
that's
on the
really,
lamb.
I think that's a really nice way to wrap up the show today, Cam, because it just goes, sorry, we have to just call out to Steve on LinkedIn for calling out chicken shit as being missing from that list. I'm with you, Steve. Also, I've just realized how many of those are derogatory to chickens, especially being a chicken. Like, that's not very kind. It's like saying throw like a girl. Chickens need to reclaim that.
No, chickens are assholes. If you've had chickens, they're absolutely terrible. And the best thing you can do is run around like a chicken with your head cut off.
Oh, that's a good one. Look, I think that's a nice way of wrapping things up, though, because I think the overall moral for today's show is that your thoughts aren't your own. Everything you think is guided by something else. You think you're immune to the influence of popular culture, advertising, news, America, or chicken-based language. But as it turns out, you're not. You're all puppets, us included. Happy Friday, everybody.
Bye, everybody.